Hi, this is Sherry Morris with Recompose Us and Dear Divorce Coach. I spend my time supporting co parents and people with conflict. And it's my privilege today to talk to a therapist at Kentlands Psychotherapy, Nicole Beane. Nicole is a licensed clinical social worker who is an adolescent and adult clinician at Kentlands Psychotherapy. Nicole specializes in working with teens, young adults, and adults on a variety of issues, including depression, anxiety, family conflict, and healthy parenting. Prior to being in private practice, Nicole worked at Children's National Medical Center in the Psychiatric Partial Hospital Program, helping children and teens with mental illness. She also grew up in Montgomery County, Maryland, and understands firsthand the pressures that teens face in the competitive school environment. Nicole lives in Poolesville, Maryland, with her two teenage children, her French bulldog Bella, and her husband. Nicole, thank you so much for being here today. And if I may start with a question, I want to understand what teens and young adults are going through developmentally so we can better understand how a divorce full of conflict might affect them.
Hi, Sherry. Thanks so much for having me. Developmentally, it's important to know what teens are going through, and they're going through quite a lot. Um, First and foremost, they're forming their own identity, and they're really trying to figure out who they are apart from their parents and their family. They also their sexuality is emerging. They're dating, or they're trying to date. This is also can be a very exciting time, especially for the girls, and they kind of have this fairy tale view of what love is at this point, which is kind of sweet. Um, the hormones can affect their mood and their body a lot, and so that it can be a hard time, in the teenage years with the mood swings and body changes.
So, lots of changes going on developmentally with a teenager. So, if parents are either going through a divorce at the time or perhaps are divorced but have some conflict between them, when you have a teenager who has a lot of body changes, a lot of identity stuff going on emerging, how can conflict between parents impact them?
Well, especially with the way that their bodies are changing and things like that. Unfortunately, sometimes if there's high conflict and divorce, some kids, the only control they have might be through eating, for example. And you might see some girls or some boys develop an eating disorder, especially because you know, eighth, ninth grade, the body's really changing, the hips are forming, and it doesn't mean that that's going to be their exact shape forever. But sometimes, girls can get really worried when they look different than some of their peers. And so it can be a really hard time for them, especially if they don't feel like, if there's a lot of other things going on with their parents and they don't feel like they can go to them necessarily and talk to them about it.
So it's a way for them to have some control, but it may be a poor coping mechanism to sort of
Exactly,
support that
exactly,
control. Okay.
exactly. And that's something that parents need to look for. They need to look, is my son or daughter, is there a drastic weight loss? Are they exercising more than they ever have? Are they going to the bathroom after eating? Different things like that. It's important to take notice, to take
And
notice.
and so if their bodies are changing and perhaps parents are going through a divorce or have some conflict between them, how do you support that teen in that space, in that moment? What messages can you send to them so that those things can happen naturally? The string bean child now develops muscles or maybe even, more body fat. Breasts are developing. How do you support that development and send them the right message, even if you as an adult have other stuff going on, perhaps with a co-parent?
Well, I think first of all, you have to remember that your child is their own person and they're separate from you. And any, of your own hangups, and we all do have hangups, but about weight or, the way you should look, you have to really try not to project that onto your child. Um, you have to be just again, it's always remembering that they are their own person, they are not you. And so to support them and just sort of ask them what they need and ask them how they're feeling. And if they feel like they can't talk to you, then you can always say, hey, do you want to talk to Aunt Susie, or do you want to go talk to a therapist? Um, you'd be surprised. Oftentimes, teenagers, especially teenage girls, really love talking to therapists. It's really kind of destigmatized, I feel like, a bit, at least in this area. And they really enjoy having someone to talk to.
So if for example, I think that's a really important point you make, Nicole. Even if you are that parent who thinks, I want to connect, I want to make sure you're okay, which I think most of us do,
Yeah,
but they may just not be able to talk to you. And that's okay. So offer them
yeah,
the opportunity, you're saying, to have that neutral space.
absolutely. And to not take it personally, you know. My own daughter, you know, often tells me she wants to go talk to somebody, and we laugh like, oh, when you're a therapist parent, they don't care. You're just their parent.
That makes perfect sense to me. And I guess one of the things I notice about what you're saying is that teens are separate from their parents. Obviously, when they were children, we were so attentive to them, they're right by our
Mhm.
side. But now they truly are growing into their own person who may have separate needs, desires, wants from you. So, bringing us back to this focus of, divorce and talking about how conflict, during divorce and post divorce can impact your teens, how do you see that happening? How do you see that play out? So we know they're having a lot of changes in their bodies, in their
Mhm.
brains. So
Yeah.
then, if they do have that conflict arising between their parents, how do you see that impacting them in their relationships, in their world?
Yeah, I think it's so hard in the teenage years with that, because if there's a divorce that has a lot of conflict in it, sometimes what can happen is a parent thinking that this teen who talks and acts like an adult, right? I mean, your teen could be taller than you, wiser than you, or appear wiser, right? Um, and they could seem like a really good confidant to sort of talk about the struggles with the divorce, or if you're very angry at your spouse, to talk about your spouse. um, but in the end, it's just really damaging and really hurtful for that child, because ultimately they are a child. They are a child, and they, their parents are who, they need to comfort them, and to be there for them. And so I think that, using a child as a confidant, and especially like telling details of an affair or something like that, can be absolutely devastating. It could be something that just, we all have memories of childhood, little things that we remember. Probably one of them being the child will remember when they were told that their parents are divorcing. But if they also get other vivid, details about affairs, or just stuff about a parent that they just don't need to know, because there's nothing that they can do about, it's so damaging. It's so damaging.
So, what about the parent? Because when I'm coaching folks, sometimes they say, look, they need to know that their mom's not a good person or their dad's not a good person. How do you
Mhm.
respond to that therapeutically, Nicole? What do you tell parents? And why is it not okay? Why is it not the other parent's job to share that information with the child?
Well, because the big thing here is that the divorce is between the parents, right? It's not between the children and the parent. So the parent is not divorcing the child. The child's relationship with the parent is their relationship, okay? And that relationship is separate. So the child doesn't have to see the parent the same way you see the parent. That person might have hurt you very badly, but that's different than, how they feel about their child. So I think it's important to remember that you're really just hurting them because they can't do anything about it. They can't do anything about anything you tell them. And all that does is sit with them. And especially same sex, you know, uh, parent and child, you know, like if a father just says awful things about the mother to the daughter. Well, the daughter knows. I mean, she probably looks like her mom a little bit, acts like her mom a little bit, right? And so then that child's going to internalize that as them being bad. And again, this isn't like something consciously that happens, it's very like subtle and unconscious. And so a parent can say, no, my child knows that, that's not true. But the fact is that it is true. It does happen.
So I think it's so important, and probably perhaps one of the most essential points you're making here, which is to be very careful in your criticism of your co-parent. So
Yes.
so keep that from your child. And let's talk a little bit more in depth about that, because sometimes there are legitimate things going on that maybe you need to handle as an adult without involving your child. If you do involve your child, what are the kinds of things that happen to children in the long run? What do you see happening to teens and young adults as they grow into young adults, and even some of your adult patients?
Yeah.
What
So
behaviors do they exhibit?
so I'll tell you, one scary one is that they could learn that the way you get what you want is through manipulation. And, manipulation is sort of using someone's emotions to get what you want. And so sometimes when there's feuding parents, a child can learn that they can use sort of, dad against mom kind of thing, or mom against dad to get what they want. And that's a really bad sort of thing to learn because then they get into a marriage and that's not what you want for them, or for them to be with their friendships, to be real manipulative. So that's one thing that can be really concerning. Another thing that can be really concerning is that these children often get into codependent relationships, meaning, they were the ones that were there for their mom or dad, right? When their mom and dad were just devastated about the divorce. And so they go on, they want to be in a relationship where they can rescue someone. And, those types of relationships often don't work because the person who needs rescuing needs to rescue themselves. They need to be whole themselves. And so that can be a really bad situation that you could end up putting your child in by using them as a confidant or telling them things about their other parent, negative things. And some parents will roll their eyes and give looks, but say, "Oh, but I said the right thing." But your body language is huge. Your body language is huge.
This is so essential and so important. And we recognize, Nicole, that parents count too, right? So putting your child first matters. And how do you do that? How do you do it so that you can manage the space with your child without rolling your eyes and saying the right thing, but having inappropriate body language? How do you not bring the conflict to your child? What are some of the things we can do as you work with people to say to them, prioritizing your child means these things? What are things parents can do so they get the support they need, especially if they do need to work with their co parent and it's difficult to do that? So, what do you recommend to the adults you work with in the space of divorce?
Right. Well, one, I have a lot of compassion for somebody who's been really hurt. And I understand that they're devastated, right? And that they need support. So I often recommend that the parent who feels the worst, the one that feels like, God, I did it again. I told my daughter things I shouldn't have. Oh, I want to do better. For them to seek some therapy themselves and tell the therapist, like, my goal is I want to put my children first. But I haven't always done it. I'm just so upset, so angry. Maybe as a child, I didn't learn how to deal with things well. And so I understand those parents and I have compassion for them, you know, the ones that are doing the things that might be harmful to the children. But I think that if they understand that I know that if they put their children first, then their children will grow up so much healthier. And I know that that is in the end what they want for them. We all know that, right? And so I would say just keep reminding yourself, even if it's a mantra, like, my children come first. I love them. I just want what's best for them. This is not what's best for them. You know, me talking about their parent is not what's best for them. Me telling them details is not what's best for them.
Nicole, that's so well said. And one of the things I most appreciate is that you're saying everyone can and should seek their own support. And
Mhm.
as a co parent coach and a coach to individuals going through separation and divorce, I often recommend that. I also say be careful of who you choose, it matters. Find out a little bit about your therapist, their
Mhm.
perspective on these issues. What, if they're willing to share what their own journey has been? Because you need an objective lens and you need someone who can hold you gently accountable. And no matter what I say in your communication with your co parents, stay neutral. Talk freely with people you can talk with, and then bring only the neutral stuff to your co parent because you staying neutral will help you put your child first. And one of the big beefs I have with some support groups for my separated and divorced parents are that you find a lot of energy that may not be positive. And I think you know it when you see it, sort of thing. So if you're in a group of people that all they do is unload with each other and give lots of tips that aren't particularly helpful for staying neutral, you might consider that's not a great fit. And finding even a therapist or a coach who will hold you gently accountable is really everything. And it can be hard to do, especially as you say, I have so much compassion too for the deep space of hurt for people. But knowing that we are adults and that it's our job to protect and care for these children matters. And I so appreciate the wisdom, the advice, and the work you're doing with people in real time, Nicole, to help them do better for and with their children. And honestly, I especially appreciate what you're doing for teens now during this difficult time. So, how can people find you if they want to reach out? I know your schedule is very busy, but in the event you have any space and time,
Yeah.
how can people find you?
So I'm at Kentlands Psychotherapy in Gaithersburg, Maryland. And so we are, let's see, we are on Facebook and Instagram. And I would say you could just look there or just Google us, Kentland Psychotherapy. We've got a lot of
Absolutely.
great reviews. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I would say that the intersection of Kentland Psychotherapy and all the good work they do with individuals, with teens, with children, with couples, it's such an amazing intersection now with recompose.us, which is really the space for conflict coaching. And really, it's all about relationships in all areas of our lives. So I so appreciate, Nicole, that you were willing and able to talk today about the space of teens and conflict and divorce and co parenting. You're an expert. I appreciate you. And we have so many more things we can talk about. So I look forward
Yeah.
to the next time. Thank you so much. And we'll talk again soon.
Thanks, Sherry. Bye bye.